Whether it's the hallowed beaches of Gallipoli, the rolling fields of the Somme, or the jungles of Vietnam, a visit to an Australian battlefield is always a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Today we'll take you virtually to some of Australia's most significant battlefields.
November 11 marks Remembrance Day, where the armistice was signed that ended the First World War, and that took place on the Western Front. So that's a great place for us to start. Let's go to the Western Front. Let's talk to our historian who leads all our Western Front tours. It's Pete Smith. Pete, thanks for joining us from the Western Front.
Hey, Matt. Nice to be with you.
Mate, where are you now? I can see you're not inside. You're obviously out and about on the battlefields. Where exactly are you?
Yeah, well, I'm standing in the Commonwealth War Grave Cemetery very close to my house, Bulls Road Cemetery. So one of those Commonwealth War Grave cemeteries scattered across the battlefields of the Western Front.
It's one of the most fascinating aspects of visiting the Western Front, Pete, are those incredible cemeteries. Everyone tells a different story. They're a very emotive place to visit. Do you ever get sick of visiting cemeteries, considering you go to so many of them on the battlefields?
It's a very good question. No, I don't. They're all so different, and they're also very moving. But I like that difference in the styles of the cemeteries. It's one of the interesting things I get asked quite often. Which cemetery do I prefer? It depends on the time of the year. It depends on how I'm feeling, even. But no, everyone is interesting. Sadly, the remains of the soldiers obviously are buried within them, but that's part of the enjoyment is researching those men and bringing them back to life again.
I can tell by your accent, Pete, that you're not originally an Australian, but you lead all of our Australian passengers on the battlefields. How does a Brit like yourself relate to this Aussie history?
Well, it's very easy, really. It's helped by my clients to a certain extent. They bring the history with them. I then enhance the history by taking them to the places that they're interested in. But it's something that's always interested me, and I suppose it's easier with the Australians because the service records are available. So it also brings the men alive when you can see all of their service records. Sadly, for the British soldiers, we're not able to access them in most cases because they were destroyed in the bombing of the Second World War. So that being able to look at the service files, to bring people that are very interested in their history, it just brings it alive for me, and hopefully I bring it alive for them.
Well, I know that you certainly do, Pete. We get amazing feedback about the job that you do. And people who are watching this may have tuned in to listen to us on our Battle Walks podcast that we do every week, where we walk the battlefields. I've got to say something I'm really excited about is, as of next year, in September next year, I'm coming over there and you and I are going to be leading a tour together, the McLachlan signature tour. It's going to be great fun, mate. I can't wait to actually walk the battlefields with you in person.
No, I'm looking forward to it immensely with this long, almost a 2-year layoff yeah, it's great to be back on the battlefield, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Let's talk about some of the Australian sites that people most want to visit when they go to the battlefields, because this is the real opportunity of visiting the Western Front, to learn about the Anzacs, to learn what the Australians did between 1916 and 1918. So the first one that many Australians want to see is probably the most tragic story. That's the battlefield of Fromelles. Tell us about the experience of visiting Fromelles.
Yeah, well, Fromelles a great place to go to. Obviously, not it's a very sad place to go to, but it's because there's so many different aspects of it to look at. You've got VC Corner Cemetery, where the men that were recovered are buried, initially recovered, are buried there. We now have the new cemetery of Pheasant Wood, which a recent recovery of burials from a mass grave, so we can go and have a look at the men that are buried there. Then there's the battlefield itself, and the famous Cobbers Memorial, which is exceptional Sergeant Fraser carrying his wounded comrade over his shoulder. So we can go and explore that site as well. And now we have the new museum. So there's a museum there dedicated to the Battle of Fromelles. So you've got all those aspects, pull them together, and it's a great place to go and explore.
Another place that I always love going to when I'm on the battlefields is the Eap Salient up in the north in Belgium. And probably Hill 60 is the most famous site within the Eap Salient. Tell us what it's like to walk amongst the smashed pillboxes and ruined trenches on Hill 60.
Well, because there's so little of the original battlefield for us to see, Hill 60 is very special. It's got to be one of the most interesting places to go, to actually walk on the ground, which is still the original ground. It's not been ploughed, it's not been levelled. So we are actually walking on part of the battlefield. Connection to Australia, of course, because of the tunnels beneath and the mine that was detonated during the Battle of Messines. So it just adds that extra dimension, that ability to walk on the battlefield, to walk in the craters and the shell holes and look at the bunkers that have been left.
And finally, of course, Pete, the Australian National Memorial at Villers-Bretonneux. No trip to the Western Front would be complete without visiting that. Some new additions lately to that site. So it's a site that's been there for nearly 100 years, and now there's some brand new additions to the site as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Sir John Monash Centre that's been added to the memorial to the missing of France, which is, I mean, it's a fantastic memorial to go and have a look at, designed by Lucian. So it was a wonderful thing to go and see anyway. But you can climb the tower. But now to go behind it into the new Sir John Monash Centre, yeah, wonderful. I mean, to go and get the full experience of Australians on the Western Front. The only downside is the amount of time that you need there, because there is so much to see and to do.
Well, Pete, there's so many wonderful Australian sites on the battlefield. Thank you so much for bringing them alive for so many Australian visitors. A whole range of tours that people can do with you to walk those sites. But we're just really excited about getting back there in 2022 and walking the ground in the footsteps of the Anzacs.
Oh, I can't wait, Matt. I just can't wait.